Some say fairy tales don't exist in our modern world. But on a rain-soaked night in downtown Seattle, rookie firefighter Jack Morrison is about to learn otherwise. Running into a burning orphanage, he finds a terrified child huddled in the smoke-filled darkness. Without hesitation, he wraps her in his coat and carries her to safety. It should have been just another rescue, but when he wakes up in a gilded palace chamber, everything changes. The orphan is actually Princess Elena, heir to a hidden European kingdom, who fled an arranged marriage by hiding among common children. Moved by his selfless courage, she makes an unprecedented decision. She wants to marry him, but can a small-town firefighter navigate the treacherous waters of royal politics? And when ancient traditions clash with matters of the heart, which will prevail? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra, special for you. Seattle Fire Station 23 stood like a weathered sentinel in the early morning fog, its red brick facade dulled by decades of Pacific Northwest rain. Jack Morrison traced his father's face in the old photograph on his locker door, both of them in turnout gear, taken on Jack's first day of training. His father's proud smile still warmed him, even 3 years after losing him to a heart attack. "Your old man would have been proud, kid," Captain Mike Rivera's gravelly voice carried across the locker room. At 58, Mike had been Jack's father's best friend, and now served as both mentor and surrogate father to the 28-year-old rookie. 6 months on the job, and you're already showing the Morrison instinct. Jack carefully tucked the photo back into his locker. "Just trying to live up to the name, Cap. You're doing more than that." Mike settled onto the bench, his salt and pepper hair catching the fluorescent light. "Yesterday's rescue at that apartment complex, that was textbook Morrison. Your father had that same sixth sense about where victims might be hiding." The morning crew was filtering in. Sanders, with his ever-present coffee mug, Rodriguez telling another of his infamous dating disasters, and Chen meticulously inspecting her gear as she did every morning. The familiar rhythm of station life, wrapped around Jack like a comfortable blanket. "Morning briefing in 5, Mike called out, heading toward the day room. "And Morrison, you're cooking tonight. Please tell me you've improved since that meatloaf incident," Jack grinned. "Hey, the dog liked it." "We don't have a dog, kid." The day room was warm with morning sunlight and the scent of coffee. Jack settled into his usual spot as Mike reviewed the day's assignments. Equipment checks, training drills, community outreach at the local elementary school. Normal, routine, safe. If only he'd known it was the last normal morning he'd ever have. Lunch came and went. Sandwiches from the deli down the street, shared. Round the kitchen table while trading stories and good-natured barbs. Jack was halfway through preparing a decidedly more ambitious dinner, his father's lasagna recipe, when the first call came in. "Engine 23, Ladder 23, Aid 23, respond to structure fire at St. Catherine's Orphanage, 1242 Pine Street." Smoke showing. Possible entrapment. The comfortable atmosphere evaporated instantly. Chairs scraped back, boots thundered on concrete, and within moments Jack was climbing into his turnout gear, muscle memory taking over as his heart began to race. "Morrison, you're with me on primary search," Mike called as they boarded the engine. The siren wailed to life, and Seattle's rainy streets began to blur past their windows. Jack checked his SCBA straps one more time, his father's voice echoing in his memory. "The gear is your lifeline, son. Treat it with respect, and it'll bring you home." None of them could have known that home was about to take on a very different meaning. The orphanage loomed ahead, orange flames already licking at the third-floor windows. Dark smoke billowed against the night sky, and Jack could see small faces pressed against second-floor windows, illuminated by the strobing emergency lights. "First priority is evacuation," Mike's voice crackled over the radio. "Morrison, Rodriguez, second floor. Sanders, Chen, take the first. Move fast, move smart." Jack secured his mask and followed Rodriguez through the front entrance. The heat hit him like a wall, even through his protective gear. Somewhere above, wood creaked ominously. They worked methodically, room by room, shepherding terrified children toward the exits where other firefighters waited to guide them to safety. The smoke was getting thicker, the heat more intense. That's when Jack heard it, a small whimper, barely audible over the roar of the flames. It came from above, from the third floor that was supposed to be empty. "Cap, I've got a possible victim on 3. He called into his radio. "Negative, Morrison. That floor's about to go. Get out now." But Jack was already moving toward the stairs, his father's words ringing in his ears. Sometimes the hardest choice and the right choice are the same thing. The decision he made in those next few moments would change not just his life, but the lives of countless others. And as he climbed those stairs, Jack Morrison had no way of knowing that he was walking into something far bigger than a fire. He was walking into destiny. He just hadn't realized yet that fairy tales could come true, even the dark ones. The third floor was a maze of fire and shadow. Jack's breathing echoed inside his mask as he crouched low, scanning through the smoke. The heat was incredible, even through his turnout gear. Above him, the ceiling groaned, a sound every firefighter learned to fear. "This is Morrison," he radioed. "Third floor, east wing." Following sounds of movement, static crackled back at him. Then Mike's voice, tight with concern. "You've got 3 minutes, kid. Then that roof's coming down, with or without you." Jack moved forward, playing his flashlight beam through the roiling smoke. A half-burned book lay on the floor. The Little Prince. Its pages curled and blackened. He stepped past it, then froze. There, a flash of movement behind a door. "Fire department, call out if you can hear me!" The whimper came again, clearer this time. Jack shouldered through the door into what looked like a storage room. Shelves lined the walls, and in the far corner, wedged between a filing cabinet and the wall, he found her. She couldn't have been more than 12, with dark hair and eyes wide with terror. She was wrapped in what looked like an expensive coat, oddly formal for an orphanage, but Jack didn't have time to question it. "I'm here to help you," he said, keeping his voice calm despite the urgency pounding in his chest. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, then coughed violently. "Okay, hold on." Jack pulled off his mask and pressed it to her face. "Take slow breaths." That's it. The building shuddered around them. Through his radio, he could hear Mike. "Morrison, get out. Roof's going." Jack scooped the girl into his arms. She was surprisingly light, clinging to him like a koala as he navigated back through the smoke-filled corridor. His lungs burned, but he forced himself to focus on each step, each turn. The girl's breathing was steadying under his mask, but his own vision was starting to blur. They were halfway down the stairs when the world exploded. Later, Jack would only remember fragments, the deafening crack of timber giving way, the sensation of falling, the girl's arms tightening around his neck. He curled himself around her as debris rained down, protecting her with his body. Then darkness. When consciousness returned, it came with the sharp smell of antiseptic and the soft beeping of medical equipment. Jack tried to open his eyes, but they felt heavy, resistant. "Easy there, hero," Mike's voice somewhere to his left. "You've been out for a few hours." Jack managed to crack his eyes open. He was in... Wait, this wasn't Seattle General. The room was too ornate, the ceiling too high. Intricate moldings traced patterns above him, and the medical equipment looked more like something from a science fiction movie. Sleek and silent. The girl. His voice was rough from smoke. "Safe," Mike said, but there was something strange in his tone. "Thanks to you, though there's something you should know about her." Before he could continue, the door opened. A tall woman entered, her bearing so regal it made the expensive room seem somehow shabby. She wore a tailored suit that probably cost more. than Jack's yearly salary, and her grey hair was swept up in an elegant twist. "Mr. Morrison," she said, her accent crisp and European. "I am Lady Victoria Blackwood, royal handler to the House of Caesarea. Her Royal Highness, Princess Elena, owes you a great debt." Jack's smoke-addled brain struggled to process the words. "Princess... Wait, what? The child you saved," Lady Victoria continued, "was not, in fact, an orphan. She was Her Royal Highness, Princess Elena of Caesarea, who had temporarily removed herself from our protection." Her tone suggested this was a massive understatement. Mike made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. "Told you there was something you should know." Jack tried to sit up, but his muscles protested. The movement sent his head spinning, and he noticed his uniform was gone, replaced by silk pajamas that felt foreign against his skin. "I don't understand," he managed. "Where am I?" "You are in the royal palace of Caesarea," Lady Victoria replied. "After you lost consciousness, Her Royal Highness insisted you receive our kingdom's finest medical care. We transported you here, immediately. Caesarea, I've never heard of it. Few have. We value our privacy, but perhaps you've heard of our exports. Our medical technology is quite advanced." That explained the sci-fi equipment. Jack's head was still spinning, but not just from the smoke inhalation now. "How long was I out?" "Long enough to cross an ocean," Mike said. "They flew us here, in some kind of private jet. Never seen anything like it. Us. At least he wasn't alone in this madness." "Her Royal Highness has requested an audience when you're feeling stronger," Lady Victoria continued. She was most insistent. Jack looked down at his silk-clad arms, then at the ornate room that was definitely not Seattle General, then at Mike's barely concealed grin. "I think," he said carefully, "I'm going to need a minute." Lady Victoria's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. "Take all the time you need, Mr. Morrison, though I should warn you, time is one luxury our princess rarely grants anyone." As if on cue, rapid footsteps sounded in the hallway, accompanied by young voices arguing in what sounded like French. Lady Victoria's eyes widened slightly, the first crack in her perfect composure. "Ah," she said, "it seems Her Highness's patience has run out." The doors burst open, and Jack's world tilted once again. The girl who burst through the doors was both familiar and strange. The same dark-haired child from the fire, but transformed. Gone were the simple clothes and fear-widened eyes. Instead, she wore a tailored blue dress that spoke of old money and older traditions. Her bearing had changed too, carrying a natural authority that seemed impossible for someone so young. Behind her came a harried-looking young woman clutching a tablet, and two stern-faced men in dark suits. "Your Highness," Lady Victoria's voice carried a warning note. "We discussed waiting." "I've waited long enough," Elena declared, then turned to Jack. Her English was perfect, touched with just a hint of accent. "How are you feeling?" "The doctors said the smoke inhalation was minimal, but I insisted they use our best regenerative treatments." Jack glanced at the ornate breakfast tray beside his bed, fresh croissants, hand-pressed juice, and what appeared to be actual gold cutlery. "I'm fine, Your Highness," he added belatedly, earning an approving nod from Lady Victoria. "Please call me Elena." She perched on the edge of his bed with casual grace. "After all, you saved my life." "About that," Jack managed, still struggling to reconcile the poised young royal with the terrified girl he'd carried from the flames. "Why were you in that orphanage?" A shadow crossed Elena's face. "Politics," she said simply. "Sometimes a princess needs to disappear for a while." "Your Highness," the woman with the tablet interjected. "The king and queen will understand," Elena finished firmly. "They always do, eventually." She turned back to Jack. "I chose St. Catherine's because of their excellent security and discretion. I didn't expect it to catch fire." "None of us did," Mike said, speaking for the first time since Elena's entrance. "Though I'm curious how a princess ended up in Seattle without anyone knowing." Elena's smile turned mischievous. We Caesarians are very good at keeping secrets. Our kingdom may be small, but we have resources and technologies that make certain things possible. Like private jets that cross oceans in hours? Jack asked, remembering Lady Victoria's earlier comment. Among other things. Eleanor's expression grew serious. Mr. Morrison. Jack, please. Jack. She tested the name carefully. What you did last night, running into that fire to save me, it was beyond brave. It's my job, Jack said simply. Any firefighter would have done the same, but they didn't. You did. Elena stood, smoothing her dress with practiced grace. The doctors say you'll be fully recovered by tomorrow. When you're ready, my parents would like to meet you. Jack's throat went dry. The king and queen? They're not as intimidating as they sound, Elena assured him, though her slight smile suggested otherwise. And they take their debts very seriously. I don't want any reward. Perhaps not, Lady Victoria interjected smoothly, but in Caesarea, tradition demands it. And tradition, Mr. Morrison, is something we take very seriously indeed. Elena nodded to her attendants, and they began filing out. At the door, she paused. Rest well, Jack Morrison. Tomorrow will be interesting. After they left, Jack fell back against his pillows, head spinning. Mike chuckled. Kid, I've seen a lot in 30 years of firefighting, but this, he shook his head, your father would have loved this. Dad would have said I was dreaming, Jack muttered, eyeing the gold cutlery on his breakfast tray. Maybe I am. Well, if you are, Mike stood, stretching. It's the kind of dream most people would kill for. Get some rest. Something tells me you're going to need it. Left alone, Jack studied his reflection in the polished surface of a nearby mirror. He looked the same, perhaps a bit paler, with a small cut above his left eyebrow from the falling. Debris, but everything else had changed. He picked up one of the croissants, still warm and perfectly flaky. As he ate, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on the edge of something vast and unknowable. His father had always said that life had a way of surprising you, but this, through the tall windows, he could see mountains rising against an unfamiliar sky, their peaks crowned with snow despite the summer season. Somewhere in this palace, a princess was telling her parents about the American firefighter who had saved her life. And tomorrow he would meet them. Jack Morrison, son of a firefighter, grandson of a factory worker, was about to have an audience with royalty. He looked again at the golden cutlery on his breakfast tray, the first of many symbols of a world he'd never imagined entering. Somewhere, he was sure his father was laughing. Well, Dad, he murmured to the empty room, I guess this is what you meant by aim high. Outside his window, the sun was setting over Caesarea, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Tomorrow would bring whatever it would bring. For now, Jack Morrison closed his eyes, letting the unreality of it all wash over him like a wave. He dreamed of fire and crowns, of smoke and silk, and of dark eyes that held secrets he was only beginning to understand. Morning arrived with a gentle knock and the whisper of heavy curtains being drawn back. Jack opened his eyes to find a middle-aged man in an impeccable uniform arranging clothes on a nearby chair. Good morning, sir. I am Sebastian, assigned to attend to your needs during your stay. His English was as crisp as his collar. Her Highness requested these for you. He gestured to the clothes, a tailored suit in charcoal grey that probably cost more than Jack's monthly rent. Beside it lay something incongruous, the outfit Elena had worn during the rescue, now carefully cleaned and pressed. The simple jeans and sweater looked strange against the palace's opulence, like a reminder of a different world. Her Highness thought you might want to see what an excellent actress she can be, Sebastian said, noting Jack's interest in the clothes. Few would suspect a princess beneath such ordinary garments. Jack touched the soft wool of the sweater. She planned it all carefully, didn't she? Indeed, sir. The princess has always been resourceful. Aye, Sebastian's tone suggested this was a diplomatic understatement. "She will explain everything herself once you're dressed. Shall I assist you with the suit?" "I think I can manage," Jack said quickly, though looking at all the buttons and cufflinks. He wasn't entirely sure. Sebastian concealed what might have been a smile. "As you wish, sir. Pull this cord when you're ready." He indicated an elegant braided rope near the bed. "I'll return to escort you to Her Highness." Once alone, Jack approached the suit with the same caution he'd use for a suspicious chemical. Spill. The fabric felt like liquid money under his fingers. Even the shoes gleamed with the kind of polish that suggested they'd never touched common ground. 20 minutes later, he stood before the mirror, barely recognizing himself. The suit fit perfectly, suspiciously so, as if someone had taken his measurements while he slept. He was adjusting the tie for the 10th time when Sebastian returned. "Her Highness awaits you in the morning room." The morning room, it turned out, was larger than Jack's entire apartment. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating walls covered in what had to be priceless artwork. Elena stood at one of the windows, now wearing a simple but elegant day dress. She turned as they entered, and for a moment, Jack saw both versions of her, the frightened girl from the fire and the composed princess, overlaid like a double exposure. "You look very handsome," she said by way of greeting, "though you seem uncomfortable." "The suit's fine," Jack said automatically. "Just different from your firefighting gear." Her smile was knowing. "Please sit. We have much to discuss." They settled into chairs that probably belonged in a museum. Sebastian materialized with coffee, served in delicate porcelain cups that Jack was terrified of breaking. "First," Elena said, "I owe you an explanation and an apology for being in the orphanage, for putting you in danger." She set her cup down with perfect precision. "I didn't expect the fire. That wasn't part of the plan." "What was the plan?" Elena's expression turned rueful. "To escape an arranged marriage." She gestured to a newspaper on a nearby table. The headline in French featured a photo of a stern-looking young man. "Prince Gustav of Normandy. Our marriage would unite two small but influential kingdoms. Everything was arranged years ago, without anyone bothering to consult me." "So you ran." "I needed time to think, to find another way." She stood, moving to a cabinet and removing a folder. "I chose Seattle because it's where my mother spent a year during her own youth. She used to tell me stories about it. The orphanage was perfect. Ngigi, good security, discreet staff, and they occasionally housed children from diplomatic families, so my accent wouldn't raise questions." She handed him the folder. Inside were detailed plans, including building layouts, staff schedules, and multiple escape routes. "You really did think of everything." "Almost everything." She touched her throat, where a small burn mark was still visible. "I didn't count on fate intervening, or you." Their eyes met, and Jack felt something shift in the air between them. Elena looked away first, smoothing her skirt with practiced grace. "My parents were furious, of course, but also impressed in their way. I've never done anything so dramatic before. And now?" "Now?" She smiled, but there was a hint of steel behind it. "Now I have leverage. A near-death experience has a way of changing perspectives. And your heroism, it's given me an idea." Jack set down his coffee cup very carefully. "Why do I feel like I'm not going to like this idea?" "Because you're intelligent as well as brave." Elena leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, Jack Morrison, how do you feel about making history?" Before he could answer, the doors opened. Lady Victoria entered, looking even more formal than the day before, if that was possible. "Your Highness, Mr. Morrison." She inclined her head slightly. "Their Majesties are ready to receive you now." Elena stood, smoothing her dress. "Perfect timing. Shall we, Jack?" He rose, trying to remember everything Sebastian had told him about royal protocol. "Do I need to bow, or—" "Just be yourself," Elena said softly. "That's the man who saved my life, after all." As they followed Lady Victoria through the palace's grand corridors, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into something much bigger than a simple audience with royalty. Elena's words echoed in his mind. "How do you feel about making history?" He had a feeling he was about to find out. Lady Victoria paused before a set of massive double doors, producing a small, leather-bound book from her jacket. "A moment, please." She flipped it open, revealing densely printed text. "The Royal Protocol Guide. Mr. Morrison, please pay attention. When entering, you'll stop 3 steps in. Bow from the waist, not too deep, mind you. Address them as Your Majesties first, then Sir and Ma'am thereafter. Speak only when spoken to. And whatever you do, don't—" The doors swung open before she could finish. The throne room of Caesarea was everything Jack had imagined and nothing he had expected. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across marble floors. The thrones themselves were surprisingly modest, elegant chairs of dark wood and gold, raised on a simple dais. But it was the people who commanded attention. King Marcus of Caesarea was a tall man with Elena's dark eyes and an athletic build that suggested he wasn't content to merely sit on his throne. Queen Sophia beside him was still strikingly beautiful, her silver-streaked hair arranged in an elegant twist. They both wore simple but exquisitely tailored clothing. No crowns, no obvious signs of royalty, except for the natural authority they projected. And they weren't alone. Standing to one side was a young man who could have stepped from the pages of a fashion magazine. Blonde, aristocratic, and radiating cold disapproval, Prince Gustav of Normandia, Jack realized. Elena's intended. "So," Gustav said before anyone else could speak, his accent clipped and precise. "This is the American fireman who's caused such a commotion." His tone made fireman sound like something scraped off a shoe. "Gustav," Elena said sweetly, "I wasn't aware you'd be joining us. How could I stay away?" He smiled without warmth. "When I heard my fiancé had been rescued by a common laborer, I simply had to see for myself." Jack felt Elena tense beside him. Before she could respond, King Marcus spoke, his voice deep and measured. "Prince Gustav, you forget yourself." He stood, and suddenly the lack of crown or scepter seemed irrelevant. His authority filled the room. "This man saved my daughter's life. In Caesarea, such a debt is sacred." "Of course, Your Majesty." Gustav bowed slightly. "I merely question the circumstances of this rescue. An American firefighter happening to be the one who finds the princess. It seems convenient." "Are you suggesting," Queen Sophia spoke for the first time, her voice soft but sharp, "that our daughter arranged to be trapped in a burning building?" Gustav's perfect composure slipped slightly. You merely nothing," the Queen continued. "You are here as a courtesy, nothing more. Remember that." Jack stood quietly, following Lady Victoria's instruction to speak only when spoken to. But he could feel the currents of power and politics swirling around him, deep waters he had no idea how to navigate. King Marcus turned to him. "Mr. Morrison, step forward, please." Jack managed the 3 steps and bow without tripping, thankful for his fire service training in moving under pressure. "Your Majesties." "Tell us," the king said, "in your own words, what happened that night." Jack glanced at Elena, who gave him an almost imperceptible nod. He took a breath and told the story simply, focusing on the facts, the call, the search, finding Elena, the escape. He left out the terror he'd felt when the roof began to collapse, the way his lungs had burned without his mask, the moment he'd thought they might not make it out. When he finished, silence hung in the air. The king and queen exchanged a look that seemed to carry an entire conversation. "Very well," King Marcus said finally. "Mr. Morrison, you have done our family and our kingdom a great service. Such an act cannot go unrewarded." "Please, Your Majesty." "I don't need—" "What you need," the Queen interrupted gently, "and what protocol demands are 2 different things. In Caesarea, we have traditions older than some nations. They cannot be ignored. Indeed, Gustav interjected smoothly, though surely a modest financial reward would suffice. After all, we wouldn't want to overwhelm a man of his station. Jack saw Elena's hands clench at her sides, but before she could speak, a new voice rang out. "Father, you can't be serious about rewarding him." A young man strode into the room, perhaps 16, with his mother's blonde hair and his father's bearing. "He's magnificent." "Thomas," the king sighed, "you're supposed to be at your studies. How could I study when there's a real hero in the palace?" Prince Thomas bounded up to Jack, eyes shining. "Did you really carry Elena through the flames? What's it like being a firefighter? Can you teach me how to—" "Thomas," the Queen's voice held warm warning. "Decorum, please." The young prince subsided, but his enthusiasm seemed to have broken the formal tension in the room. Even the king's stern expression softened slightly. "Perhaps," Queen Sophia said thoughtfully, "we should continue this discussion over lunch. Mr. Morrison must be hungry, and Elena clearly has something she wishes to say." She gave her daughter a knowing look. "She's been practically vibrating with it since they entered." Elena straightened. "I do, actually, about the matter of reward and other things." The look Gustav gave her could have frozen flame. "Elena, surely you're not suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything yet." She smiled brilliantly. "Shall we move to the dining room? I find everything is clearer with good food and better wine." As they filed out, Jack fell into step beside Prince Thomas, who was still bubbling with questions. Behind them he could hear Gustav speaking urgently to Lady Victoria, something about protocols and impossibilities. Elena caught his eye and winked, reminding him suddenly of the girl who had hidden so cleverly in an orphanage. She had a plan, he realized. She'd had one all along. He just hoped he was ready for whatever it was. The royal dining room was smaller than Jack expected, intimate even, with a round table that seated 10. A massive crystal chandelier cast warm light over the antique furnishings, and floor-to-ceiling windows offered stunning views of the mountain landscape. At the center of the table sat an ornate ring box, its presence drawing curious glances from everyone except Elena, who seemed to be carefully avoiding looking at it. "The traditional reward," Lady Victoria explained quietly to Jack as they took their seats, "for saving a member of the royal family." The ring inside was spectacular. Gold and precious stones arranged in patterns that seemed to shift in the light. Jack noticed Gustav eyeing it with barely concealed disdain. "An ancient tradition," the king began, as servers silently delivered the first course. "The ring of the royal protector, given to those who sacrifice themselves for the crown. Few have earned it in our history." Elena set down her soup spoon with deliberate care. "Actually, Father, I had something else in mind." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Gustav's soup spoon clattered against his bowl. "Elena," Queen Sophia said carefully, "what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," Elena said, her voice clear and steady, "that since I need to marry, and since the purpose of my marriage is to ensure the kingdom's future—" She turned to face Jack directly. "Why not marry the man who's already proven he would die to protect me?" The silence that followed was absolute. Even the servers froze in place. Gustav recovered first, letting out a bark of laughter that held no humor. "This is absurd. You cannot be serious." "I'm entirely serious." Elena's gaze never wavered from Jack's stunned face. "The law requires I marry before my 21st birthday. It doesn't specify I must marry nobility." "Actually," Lady Victoria interjected, looking somewhat pained, "there are several protocols regarding royal marriages that were written 300 years ago," Elena finished, "before we had a constitution, before we valued merit over birth." "Eleanor," the king said, his voice heavy with authority, "you cannot simply—" "Can't I?" She finally looked away from Jack to face her father. "You've always said that Caesarea survives by adapting. that our strength lies in knowing when to honor tradition and when to create new ones. Prince Thomas, who had been watching the exchange, like a tennis match, suddenly grinned. "She's got you there, father." "Thomas," Queen Sophia warned, but there was something thoughtful in her expression as she studied Jack. Jack himself felt like he was underwater, hearing everything through a strange filter. "Your Highness," he managed. Don't enter yet," Elena said quickly. "Just consider it. You've proven your courage, your character, your willingness to sacrifice for others. What better qualities could I ask for in a husband, in a future prince consort?" Gustav stood so abruptly, his chair scraped against the marble floor. "This is an outrage. The diplomatic implications alone would be fascinating," the Queen interrupted, smoothly. "A modern fairy tale. The brave firefighter who saved the princess, chosen for his heart rather than his title. The public would adore it. Sophia." The king turned to his wife in surprise. "Oh, come now, Marcus, you know I'm right." She sipped her wine elegantly. "The people are tired of arranged marriages and political alliances. They want romance, nobility of spirit rather than nobility of birth." But, Gustav spluttered, his perfect composure finally cracking. "He's a commoner. He knows nothing of our ways, our traditions." "He can learn," Elena said firmly. "Just as I learned to navigate a foreign city and hide in plain sight. Just as you, Gustav, learned to mask your contempt for those you consider beneath you, though not very well, I must say." Prince Thomas let out a delighted whoop, then quickly tried to hide it behind his napkin. Jack finally found his voice. "Don't I get a say in this?" The room fell silent again. Elena turned back to him, and for the first time he saw uncertainty flicker in her eyes. "Of course you do," she said softly. "I'm not trying to trap you, Jack. I'm offering you a choice. The same choice I wish I'd been given years ago." "A choice," Gustav sneered, "between being a simple firefighter and being a prince? How generous." "No," Jack said, surprising himself with the steadiness in his voice. "A choice between walking away from someone who needs help or staying to do what's right. That's what this is really about, isn't it?" Elena's smile was answer enough. The king leaned forward, studying Jack with new interest. "You understand what you'd be taking on? The responsibilities, the scrutiny, the complete transformation of your life?" "Honestly? No, I don't." Jack met the king's gaze. "But I didn't understand everything about being a firefighter when I started either. I just knew it was a way to help people, to make a difference. I learned the rest as I went." "There's rather a large gap between learning to operate a fire hose and learning to operate as royalty," Lady Victoria observed dryly. "Is there?" Jack asked. "Both require courage, dedication, the willingness to put others first. Both mean being part of something bigger than yourself." A strange expression crossed the king's face, something almost like approval. "The law," Lady Victoria began, reaching for her ever-present protocol book, "can be amended," the Queen finished firmly, "if there's sufficient cause. And I would say saving our only daughter from a burning building qualifies as sufficient cause." "Mother," Elena's composure cracked slightly, hope bleeding through. "Now, wait." The king held up a hand. "Nobody is agreeing to anything yet. This requires careful consideration, consultation with advisors, examination of precedents." "Of course," Elena said quickly. "We should take time to consider everything carefully." She turned to Jack. "Will you stay? Give this a chance?" Jack looked around the table, at the hopeful faces of Elena and Thomas, the thoughtful calculation in the Queen's eyes, the growing resignation in the King's expression, at Gustav's barely contained fury and Lady Victoria's obvious dismay, at the ancient ring still sitting in its box, representing a tradition that could either bind or transform. He thought of his father, of all their conversations about duty and service and doing what's right even when it's hard. "Especially when it's hard. Yes," he said finally, "I'll stay." The words seemed to echo in the grand room, rippling out like a stone dropped in still water. Everything would change with that simple syllable. He could feel it, see it in Elena's brilliant smile and Gustav's darkening scowl. But then, everything had already changed the moment he'd run into that burning building. The king sighed deeply. "Very well, we will explore this possibility, but," he added as Elena began to beam, "there will be conditions, many conditions." "Of course, father." Eleanor's tone was pure innocence, though her eyes sparkled with triumph. "Starting with," Lady Victoria interjected, clutching her protocol book like a shield, "a complete education in royal history, protocol, and etiquette." "Naturally," Jack agreed, fighting back a smile as he watched Gustav storm from the room. The bang of the door echoing behind him. Some fires, he was learning, burned a lot longer than others. Jack stared at the leather-bound etiquette manual in his hands, its gold-leafed pages containing what seemed like an endless list of rules. "There's really a correct way to eat soup based on the phase of the moon? Only for state dinners during equinoxes," Lady Victoria replied, perfectly serious. They sat in the palace library, surrounded by centuries of knowledge and tradition. "And of course, that's just the beginning. We haven't even touched on the proper forms of address for visiting dignitaries based on their country's historical relationships with Caesarea." A week had passed since Elena's shocking proposal, and Jack's education in royal protocol had begun in earnest. The library had become his new home, replacing the familiar comfort of the fire station with the weight of history and expectation. "In my experience," a young voice piped up, "it's better to just watch what Elena does and copy her." Prince Thomas sat sprawled in a nearby armchair, supposedly working on his own studies, but clearly more interested in Jack's lessons. "She never gets these things wrong. Her Highness," Lady Victoria corrected automatically, "has had these protocols ingrained since birth. Mr. Morrison doesn't have that luxury." "Just give him a chance," Thomas insisted. "He learned how to use all 17 different forks at dinner last night." 16, Jack corrected. "I'm still not sure about the fish knife." "The fish knife," Lady Victoria sighed, "is the least of our concerns." She consulted her ever-present tablet. "This afternoon we have deportment and basic dance instruction, followed by a primer on Caesarian military history, and then—" "Actually," Elena's voice came from the doorway, "I'm stealing him for a while." She entered the library with her usual grace, but Jack noticed something different about her bearing. A slight tension in her shoulders, a careful neutrality in her expression. "Your Highness," Lady Victoria protested, "the schedule can wait." Eleanor's tone was firm. "Jack needs to see something. Thomas, you too." Thomas bounded up eagerly. "Is this about the thing you mentioned this morning?" "Perhaps." Eleanor's eyes met Jack's. "Bring the etiquette manual. You'll want to see how it measures up against reality." They followed her through the palace corridors, past paintings of stern-faced ancestors and display cases filled with historical artifacts. Jack had started learning their significance. Each item, each portrait representing another piece of the complex puzzle that was Caesarian history. Elena led them to a part of the palace Jack hadn't seen before. The grandeur gradually gave way to simpler architecture until they reached what looked like a service entrance. A guard stood at attention, nodding respectfully as Elena approached. "The people's entrance," she explained, pushing open the heavy door, "where citizens come to petition the crown." The room beyond was large and plain, with wooden benches filled with people from all walks of life. Some wore business attire, others work clothes. All looked up as they entered, whispers rippling through the crowd as they recognized Elena. "Every day," Elena said quietly, "people come here with their problems, their hopes, their fears. Some need help with medical bills. Others have disputes that need royal mediation. Many just want to be heard." An elderly woman approached, curtsying shakily. "Your Highness, I'm sorry to disturb you, but my grandson—" "Mrs. Kovac." Elena's face softened. "How is little Peter? Did the treatment help?" The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, thanks. Do you? The doctors say he'll make a full recovery." Jack watched as Elena spoke with the woman, amazed at how she remembered not just the case, but personal details about the family. Thomas, seeing his expression, grinned. "She does this 3 times a week," he explained. "Says it's the most important part of being royal, remembering who we serve." More people approached, each with their own story. Elena listened to them all, making notes, offering solutions, or simply sympathy. Jack found himself drawn into conversations, his firefighter's instinct for helping people taking over. "You see," Elena said later as they walked back through the palace, "all those rules in your manual, they're not just for show, they're tools, ways to show respect, to maintain order, to help people feel heard and valued. Like how we position the trucks. At a fire scene," Jack mused, "there's a protocol that looks formal but actually helps us work more efficiently." "Exactly." Elena's eyes lit up. "That's what I've been trying to tell Father. We don't need a noble bloodline to understand service and duty. Sometimes the best leaders come from people who already know how to help others." They reached a balcony overlooking the palace gardens. The setting sun painted the mountains in shades of gold and purple, a view that still took Jack's breath away. "Of course," Thomas added with a mischievous grin, "it doesn't hurt that you managed to save the princess." "Very traditional, that." Elena laughed, but Jack noticed she stepped slightly closer to him, her hand brushing his briefly. These small moments of contact had been increasing over the past week, each one sending a jolt of awareness through him that had nothing to do with royal protocol. "Speaking of tradition," Lady Victoria's voice came from behind them, making them all jump slightly. "You've missed dance instruction, Mr. Morrison." "My fault," Elena said quickly. "I needed to show him. I know exactly what you showed him." "Your Highness." Lady Victoria's stern expression softened slightly. "And while I appreciate the lesson in practical governance, the fact remains that Mr. Morrison will need to dance at the upcoming state dinner." "State dinner?" Jack felt his stomach drop. "What state dinner?" "The one where we formally announce your courtship," Lady Victoria said, consulting her tablet. "In 3 weeks' time." 3 weeks? Jack looked at Elena in alarm. "That's not much. In time to learn everything." "You'll be fine," Elena assured him. "Just remember what we saw today. All the rules, all the protocol. It's just another way of helping people, of serving something larger than ourselves." "Besides," Thomas added cheerfully, "if you mess up, it'll give people something to talk about besides Gustav's latest tantrum." "Thomas!" Elena scolded, but she was fighting a smile. Jack looked down at the etiquette manual, still clutched in his hand. Its golden rules suddenly seemed less intimidating, more like the training manuals he'd studied to become a firefighter. Different tools, same purpose, helping people, making a difference. "Right then," he said, squaring his shoulders. "Lady Victoria, I believe you mentioned something about proper dance form?" Elena's brilliant smile was worth all the protocol in the world. The note appeared on Jack's breakfast tray 2 weeks into his royal education, a single sheet of expensive paper, the message composed of letters cut from newspapers and magazines. "Leave now, or face the consequences. Some fires can't be fought." Sebastian, delivering Jack's morning coffee, noticed his frown. "Is something amiss, sir?" Jack handed him the note. The butler's carefully neutral expression flickered. "I see. I shall inform security immediately." "No," Jack said, surprising himself. "Let me handle this my way first." After Sebastian left, Jack studied the note more carefully, his firefighter's training kicking in. The paper was high quality, the kind used in royal correspondence. The letters were cut from local Caesarian magazines. This wasn't some external threat. It came from inside the palace. "Analyzing the evidence?" Elena's voice came from the doorway. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair arranged in an elegant twist that made Jack's heart skip despite the serious situation. "Old habits?" He showed her the note. Her expression darkened. "Gustav," she said immediately, "or one of his supporters. They're getting desperate." The state dinner was a week away. Jack's crash course in royal protocol had been intense: dancing lessons, history lectures, endless etiquette rules. But he'd also been watching, learning things that weren't in any manual. The way power moved through the palace like current through a wire, the alliances and enmities that shaped decisions, the whispers that followed him through ornate corridors. "It's not just about us anymore, is it?" he asked quietly. Elena settled into a chair, her posture perfect even in private. "It never was. Gustav's family has been pushing for this marriage for years. It would give them significant influence over Caesaria's technology sector, our medical advances." She gestured to the window, where a sleek aircraft, unlike anything Jack had ever seen, glided silently past. "We're small, but we're advanced. The wrong alliance could change everything, and the right one," her smile was quick but genuine, "could change everything in a better way." She reached for his hand, then hesitated. "Jack, if this is too much—" "It's not." He caught her hand, feeling the slight tremor she was trying to hide. "I've never run from a fire, and I'm not starting now." A discreet cough from the doorway made them separate. Lady Victoria entered, carrying a thick folder and wearing an expression that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. "The latest intelligence reports," she said, setting the folder down. "It seems Prince Gustav has been busy." The folder contained photographs, transcripts of conversations, detailed reports of clandestine meetings. Gustav hadn't been idle these past weeks. He'd been gathering allies, making promises, building a coalition of those who opposed Eleanor's choice. "Half the noble council," Eleanor murmured, flipping through the pages. "More than I expected. They fear change," Lady Victoria said, her usual crisp tone softened slightly, "and Mr. Morrison represents significant change." "Good," Elena said firmly. "Change is long overdue." Jack studied a photograph of Gustav meeting with several elderly men, in formal dress. "These are the conservatives you mentioned? The ones who opposed modernizing the succession laws?" Elena looked at him in surprise. "You've been paying attention to more than just dance steps." "Had to understand what I was walking into." He tapped the photo. "These men, they're not just opposed to me, they're opposed to what you want to do with the kingdom." "Very good, Mr. Morrison," Lady Victoria said approvingly. "You're learning to see beneath the surface." Another photo showed Gustav leaving a private club, his expression smugly confident. Jack remembered the prince's cold eyes, his casual dismissal of common people. "He's not going to stop with threatening notes, is he?" "No," Elena said quietly. "He isn't." "Then we need to be ready." Jack straightened, feeling the familiar focus that came before entering a dangerous situation. "In the fire service, we have a saying: hope for the best, plan for the worst." Lady Victoria raised an elegant eyebrow. "And what's the worst? In your assessment?" "That Gustav tries something at the state dinner. It's his last chance to stop the official announcement of our courtship." Jack looked at Elena. "How many people will be there?" "Over 200. All the noble families, foreign diplomats, media. Perfect cover for something to go wrong." Jack began pacing, mind working through scenarios like he would at a fire scene. "We need to check the guest list, security protocols, evacuation routes." "Mr. Morrison," Lady Victoria interrupted. "This is hardly a burning building, isn't it?" He turned to face them. "Different kind of fire, same principles. Identify the risks, protect the vulnerable, control the situation." Elena was watching him with growing appreciation. "He's right. We've been playing defense, following protocol. Maybe it's time for a firefighter's perspective." Lady Victoria looked between them, then sighed deeply. "I suppose certain protocols could be adjusted for safety reasons." "Good." Jack picked up the threatening note. "Because whoever sent this just made a mistake. They assumed I'd be scared because I don't know their world, but they don't know mine either." "And what is your world, Mr. Morrison?" Lady Victoria asked. one where you run toward danger to help others. He met Elena's eyes. One where doing what's right matters more than doing what's expected. Elena stood, smoothing her dress with practiced grace. Lady Victoria, please arrange a meeting with security. Quietly. And, she smiled slightly, perhaps we should review the protocol for emergency situations. All of them? Lady Victoria looked pained. All of them. Elena's expression hardened. Gustav wants to play with fire. Let's make sure he learns why that's dangerous. As they left to make arrangements, Jack studied the threatening note one last time. In the fire service, he'd learned that the most dangerous blazes often started small. A spark, a smolder, then suddenly an inferno. Gustav's threats were just the spark. The question was, who would control the burn? Jack's old firefighting helmet sat on the desk in his palace quarters, its scratched surface a stark contrast to the ornate furnishings. He'd asked Mike to send it from Seattle, needing something familiar to ground him as the state dinner approached. Now, 3 days before the event, it would prove more valuable than he'd imagined. The alarm came just after midnight, not the familiar bell of a fire station, but the urgent knock of palace security at his door. Mr. Morrison, the guard's face was tense. There's a situation in the ancient archives. The archives were housed in the palace's east wing, a climate-controlled facility containing centuries of royal history. As they hurried through the corridors, Jack could smell it, the acrid scent of electrical fire. The cooling system malfunctioned, the security chief explained, meeting them at the archive entrance. Temperatures are rising rapidly. If those documents are damaged, where's the main electrical panel? Jack was already rolling up his sleeves, mind shifting into firefighter mode. Sub-basement, but sir, protocol requires we wait for the official response team. Those documents are irreplaceable. Elena's voice cut through the growing chaos. She appeared beside them, still in an evening gown from some late function. And the response team is 20 minutes away. Jack met her eyes, saw the trust there. I need my helmet, and any protective gear you've got. 5 minutes later, he descended into the sub-basement, wearing his old helmet and borrowed maintenance coveralls. The electrical room was already hazy with smoke. Talk me through the layout, he said into the radio clipped to his collar. Lady Victoria's voice came back, taut but controlled. Main panel is on the north wall. The archive cooling system runs on a separate circuit, third breaker from the left. Jack moved carefully through the smoke, using his hands to guide him along the wall. The heat was building, not yet dangerous, but heading there fast. He found the panel, felt the telltale warmth of overloading circuits. Above, he could hear the controlled chaos of archive staff evacuating precious documents. But something about the situation nagged at him, the timing, just days before the state dinner, the failure of multiple backup systems. The breaker box showed signs of tampering. Subtle, but clear to experienced eyes. This wasn't an accident, he reported. Someone sabotaged the cooling system. Elena's voice came over the radio, cold with anger. Gustav. Can't prove it yet. Jack worked quickly, bypassing the damaged circuits. But yeah, probably. It took 30 minutes to secure the electrical system and vent the smoke. When Jack emerged, sooty but successful, he found a small crowd gathered. Elena, of course, Lady Victoria, several archive staff, and, interestingly, 3 elderly men he recognized. From the intelligence photos, members of the Conservative Noble Council. The archives are safe, he reported, pulling off his helmet. Might want to update the electrical system, though, and the security protocols. The council members whispered among themselves, looking at him with something new in their eyes. Not quite respect, but consideration. Well handled, Mr. Morrison, one of them said finally. Most efficient. They departed, still whispering. Lady Victoria watched them go with a slight smile. You may have just gained some unlikely allies. How so? The archives, Elena explained, contain the documents that establish their families, positions, their rights and privileges. by saving them. She touched his sooty sleeve gently. You've shown you understand the value of tradition, even while representing change. Jack looked down at his helmet, its scratches and scars telling stories of other fires, other rescues. I understand protecting what matters. Doesn't matter if it's people or history. Indeed. Lady Victoria made a note on her tablet. Perhaps we should add emergency response protocols to your royal education, since you seem to have a talent for it. Elena's smile was proud, but her eyes were troubled. Gustav's getting bolder. If he'd succeeded in destroying the archives, he didn't, Jack said firmly, and now we know more about what we're dealing with. Oh, yeah. Jack set his helmet carefully beside a priceless Ming vase. We're not just fighting for our future anymore. We're fighting for Caesaria's past too. And that might just change everything. The royal portrait painter tutted softly as Jack shifted. In his chair. Please, sir, maintain your position. The light is perfect. Jack tried to settle back into the formal pose, feeling stiff in the ceremonial uniform they'd given him. The deep blue fabric was immaculate, golden braid catching the morning sun that streamed through the studio windows. A far cry from turnout. Aegir, but Eleanor had insisted on having his first official portrait done before the state dinner. You're frowning again, Eleanor observed from where she watched, amusement dancing in her eyes. Think of it as another kind of protection equipment. My fire gear didn't have quite so many medals, Jack muttered, but he softened his expression. The portrait session was just the beginning of a day packed with royal duties. After 2 hours of sitting still, something Jack found harder than running into burning buildings, they moved on to a charity foundation meeting. The Children's Hospital expansion, Elena explained as they walked through the palace corridors, their footsteps echoing on marble floors. We're using some of our medical technology advances to create a state-of-the-art pediatric wing. The meeting room was filled with doctors, administrators, and foundation directors. Jack expected to just observe, but Elena had other plans. Jack has extensive experience with emergency medical response, she announced to the group. His perspective could be valuable. And somehow, Jack found himself deep in discussion about emergency protocols, suggesting modifications based on his firefighting experience. The doctors were particularly interested in his ideas about improving response times and coordinating multiple teams during crises. You see, Elena said later as they reviewed the meeting notes, your experience matters here, just in different ways than before. The afternoon brought a public appearance at a local school. Children crowded around, more interested in Jack's stories about fighting fires than his new royal status. He demonstrated how to do a proper stop, drop, and roll, making them laugh while teaching valuable lessons. They'll remember that better than any formal speech, Lady Victoria admitted, watching from the sidelines. But it was the evening event that truly tested Jack's growing comfort with royal duties. A diplomatic reception, full of subtle political currents and unspoken tensions. Gustav was there, holding court among his supporters, his smile sharp as a knife. Remember, Elena murmured as they circulated, every gesture carries meaning here. Jack nodded, recalling his lessons. He kept his back straight, his expression pleasant but reserved. When Gustav made a pointed comment about maintaining proper standards, Jack responded with a courteous nod and a subtle reference to the archive incident that made several nobles hide smiles behind their hands. Well played, Lady Victoria said, afterward actually sounding impressed. You're learning the language of court politics. It's not so different from sizing up a fire scene, Jack replied. Reading the situation, identifying risks, maintaining calm under pressure. Elena touched his arm gently. Look, she said, nodding toward where his official portrait was being unveiled. The first image of him in his new role. The painter had captured something Jack hadn't expected. Yes, he wore the formal uniform, sat in the traditional pose. But there was a steadiness in his gaze, a strength that came from more than just royal authority. He looked like someone who could bridge two worlds, the practical courage of a firefighter and the dignified purpose of a royal. "That's how they'll see you at the state dinner," Elena said softly. "Not just as the American who saved me, but as someone who belongs here, someone who could help lead Caesarea into a new era." Jack studied the portrait, thinking of all that had changed in such a short time. The uniform might be different, the duties more complex, but the core purpose remained the same: protecting people, serving something larger than himself. "Ready for tomorrow's preparations?" Elena asked. Jack straightened, unconsciously matching his portrait's posture. "Ready." The state dinner was 2 days away. Gustav's supporters were watching. The future of Caesarea hung in the balance. Time to prove that a firefighter could indeed become a prince. The document landed on Jack's desk with a soft thud, its manila envelope marked with the royal security seal. Inside was a single page of intercepted communications, emails, phone transcripts, and financial records, all pointing to something far darker than mere political maneuvering. "This arrived an hour ago," Elena said, her voice tight, "from our intelligence division. They've been monitoring Gustav's communications since the archive incident." Jack scanned the document, his firefighter's instinct for danger rising with each line. The correspondence revealed a complex web of deals and threats, all centered around Caesarea's medical technology patents. Gustav hadn't just been pushing for a marriage alliance, he'd been orchestrating a complete takeover. "He's been buying loyalty," Jack said, pointing to a series of transactions. "These noble families, the ones who've been opposing us most strongly. They're all receiving consulting fees from shell companies in Normandia." "Keep reading." Elena's face was pale but composed. The next section detailed Gustav's true plan. Once married to Elena, he would use his position to force through changes to patent law, effectively transferring control of Caesarea's medical innovations to Normandian companies. The kingdom's greatest asset, its advanced medical technology, would be stripped away. The children's hospital, Jack realized, the treatments Mrs. Kovac's grandson received, all of it would become profit centers, Elena finished bitterly, available only to those who could pay Gustav's prices. Lady Victoria entered, looking more disheveled than Jack had ever seen her. "The king has been informed. He's not pleased." "Has Gustav been confronted?" Jack asked. "We can't," Elena said. "Not yet. These documents were obtained through unofficial channels. If we move too openly, he'll deny everything and destroy the evidence." Jack studied the papers again, thinking of fire investigation procedures. "In firefighting, we say the smoke tells you where to look for the fire. These documents are our smoke. We need to follow them to the source." "The state dinner," Lady Victoria said suddenly. "All the players will be there. If we could catch them in the act." "It's risky," Elena warned. "Gustav isn't working alone. We don't know how deep this goes." Jack reached for his tablet, pulling up the dinner's seating arrangement. "Then we use their plan against them, let them think they're in control." But a knock at the door interrupted him. Prince Thomas burst in, face flushed with excitement. "Jack, Elena, you need to see this." He thrust forward his phone, showing a live news feed. The headline made Jack's blood run cold. Questions raised about American firefighters' heroic rescue. The story suggested the orphanage fire had been staged, a ploy to insert Jack into the royal family. Anonymous sources claimed to have evidence that the entire rescue had been orchestrated. "Gustav's countermove," Elena said grimly. "Discredit you, discredit us, make his traditional alliance look like the only safe option." "But that's ridiculous," Thomas protested. "We all saw the security footage. The fire was real." "The truth matters less than the story," Lady Victoria observed, "especially with the state dinner so close." Jack felt the familiar calm that came in crisis situations. "No," he said slowly, "the truth matters more than ever, because Gustav just made a mistake." "Oh?" Elena raised an eyebrow. He's thinking like a politician, trying to control the narrative. But fires leave evidence, real ones, fake ones. They all leave traces. Jack tapped the intercepted documents. Just like financial transactions leave paper trails, understanding dawned in Elena's eyes. The fire investigation report and the archive system data. Exactly. Gustav's trying to write a story, but we can prove what really happened, both times. Jack turned to Lady Victoria. How fast can we get the full technical analysis from both incidents? A rare smile crossed her face. For this, very fast indeed. Eleanor straightened, her royal bearing taking over. Thomas, get me everything from the orphanage investigation. Lady Victoria, I need our best analysts on these financial records. Jack, I'll review the technical evidence, he finished. Look for anything that ties back to Gustav's people. As they moved into action, Jack caught Elena's hand. We're going to beat him. She squeezed his fingers. Yes, because he doesn't understand something. You taught me. What's that? Sometimes the best way to fight fire is with a firefighter. The hidden palace map spread across Jack's desk was centuries old, its yellowed parchment showing secret passages and forgotten corridors that didn't appear in modern blueprints. Thomas had discovered it in the archives Jack had saved, and now it became the centerpiece of their counter-strategy. The service corridor behind the grand ballroom, Jack traced the path with his finger, connects to Gustav's private meeting room, and according to the surveillance team, that's where he's planning to gather his conspirators during the dinner. Eleanor leaned over his shoulder, her perfume momentarily distracting him. The acoustics in that passage are remarkable. Something about the old stone construction. She smiled. Perfect for gathering evidence. They'd spent the day before the state dinner building their case. The fire investigation reports had revealed traces of sophisticated accelerants in the orphanage blaze, not planted by Jack's team, but matching compounds found in Normandian military facilities. The archive's electrical system showed signs of professional sabotage, using techniques unique to Gustav's security forces. The pieces are in place, Lady Victoria reported, consulting her tablet. The king has authorized our plan, though he's not happy about the risk. Neither am I, Jack admitted, studying Elena's determined face. If anything goes wrong, it won't. She touched the map gently. Because we have something Gustav doesn't. What's that? People who believe in us. She nodded to Thomas, who was coordinating with security through his phone. Noble families who remember how you saved their heritage in the archives. Palace staff who've seen how you treat everyone with respect. The medical community impressed by your ideas for the children's hospital. And most importantly, Lady Victoria. Added with unusual warmth, we have a firefighter who understands that sometimes you have to let a controlled burn happen to prevent a greater disaster. Jack nodded, the strategy clear in his mind. They would let Gustav think his plan was working, gather his conspirators together, and then... The evidence packets are ready, Thomas reported. Photos, financial records, technical analyses, everything tied up with a neat bow. And the media? Elena asked, standing by, along with representatives from every major medical charity we support. Thomas grinned. Gustav wants to talk about Jack's character? Wait until they hear what he planned to do with our medical patents. Jack checked his watch. 6 hours until the state dinner. Everyone knows their positions, Lady Victoria nodded. Security is in place. The king and queen will keep Gustav occupied during the first course. Elena makes her announcement about modernizing the patent system during the main course, which is when Gustav will likely call his emergency meeting. Elena continued. His supporters will slip away to the private room, thinking they're about to finalize their takeover plan. And that's when we move, Jack finished. He looked at the map again, at the web of passages that would let them surround Gustav's meeting undetected. It reminded him of planning a fire attack, identifying access points and escape routes. I still can't believe he tried to fake evidence. About the orphanage fire, Thomas said, shaking his head, as if Jack would ever stage something like that. He doesn't understand, Elena said softly. Men like Gustav, they think everything can be bought or manipulated. They don't comprehend someone who simply does the right thing because it's right. Jack rolled up the map carefully. Then let's show him. They spent the next hours in final preparations. Jack was fitted for his formal uniform one last time. Elena reviewed her announcement speech, and Lady Victoria coordinated with security teams through her ever-present tablet. As evening approached, Jack stood at his window, watching the first. Guests arrive. Beautiful people in expensive clothes, many of them likely involved in Gustav's conspiracy. Yet all he could think about was that night in the orphanage, carrying Elena through the smoke. One simple act of duty that had changed. Everything ready? Elena appeared in his doorway, resplendent in a blue gown that matched his uniform. Jack straightened, feeling the weight of his position, his duty, his love for this remarkable woman and her kingdom. Ready, he said. Time to fight fire with fire. The royal sword of Caesarea gleamed in its display case near the grand ballroom's entrance, its ancient blade catching the light from crystal chandeliers. Jack paused before it as guests filed in, remembering Lady Victoria's words about its significance. The sword represents not just authority, but responsibility, the weight of protecting what matters most. The state dinner unfolded like an elaborate dance, each move choreographed with precision. Jack sat at the high table beside Elena, watching Gustav work the room with practiced charm. The prince's confidence was absolute. He had no idea that the hidden passages around his private meeting room were already filled with security teams and recording equipment. Smile, Elena murmured, raising her champagne glass. He's watching. Jack managed a relaxed expression, though his firefighter's instincts were on high alert. Around them, over 200 guests dined on elaborate courses, their jewelry catching the light like stars. Many wore expressions that were equally bright and equally artificial. Right on cue, Elena rose for her announcement as the main course was served. Honored guests, her voice carried clear and strong. Tonight we celebrate not just tradition, but innovation. Caesarea's medical technologies have helped countless lives. Today, we announce plans to make these advances even more accessible, modernizing our patent system to... The reaction was immediate. Gustav's face darkened. Several nobles shifted uncomfortably. Jack watched as subtle signals passed between. Conspirators, a dabbed napkin here, a adjusted cufflink there. If you'll excuse me, Gustav announced smoothly, rising. An urgent matter requires my attention. One by one, his supporters made similar excuses. Jack caught Thomas's eye across the room. The young prince activated his phone, signaling the teams in the passages. "Showtime!" Jack whispered to Elena. She squeezed his hand under the table, then continued her speech as if nothing was happening. Jack waited 3 minutes, then followed the pre-planned route through the servants' corridors. The hidden passage was narrow but well-maintained, centuries of secret meetings having kept it functional. He could hear Gustav's voice through the ancient stone. Everything is prepared. Once the patents are transferred, Jack pressed his radio twice, the signal. Suddenly, the wall panels slid aside, revealing security teams at every entrance. Jack stepped through as Gustav's words died in his throat. "Please," Jack said calmly. "Continue. You were explaining how you plan to steal Caesarea's medical technologies." Gustav recovered quickly, his smile razor-sharp. "Steal? I was merely discussing reorganization for greater efficiency, though I suppose a firefighter wouldn't understand such complex matters." Actually, Elena's voice came from another entrance as she entered with Lady Victoria. "He understands perfectly. Just as he understood the evidence you left at the orphanage. Professional accelerants are quite distinctive, aren't they?" Gustav's supporters began edging toward the doors, but royal guards blocked their escape. Thomas appeared with a team of technical experts, already downloading data from the room's computers. "You have no proof," Gustav snarled, but his composure was cracking. We have everything, Jack said. The financial records, the sabotage evidence, the surveillance recordings. You're making right now. A firefighter learns to be thorough about gathering evidence. You never know what detail might matter in an investigation. You're nothing, Gustav spat. A common laborer playing at royalty. Do you think these people will ever truly accept you? That Elena's infatuation will last? You still don't understand. Elena said, her voice cold. Jack isn't playing at anything. He proves his worth through actions, not ancestry, which is more than I can say for you. Gustav moved with sudden violence, reaching for something inside his jacket. But Jack had been reading body language all evening, recognizing the signs of someone about to do something desperate. He moved. Faster, using techniques learned in rescue operations to control Gustav's movement without causing injury. The prince found himself pinned against an antique desk, Jack holding him with professional calm. The object that fell from his jacket wasn't a weapon, but a data drive, likely containing the final pieces of evidence they needed. The thing about fires, Jack said conversationally, maintaining his hold, is that they reveal the truth. Strip away pretense. Show what people are really made of. He looked at Gustav's shocked supporters. Remember that next time you consider betraying your kingdom. Elena picked up the data drive, then nodded to security. Take them to the containment room and send in the media teams. I believe they'll find this evening's events quite newsworthy. As Gustav was led away, still protesting, Jack caught sight of their reflection in a window. Himself in his formal uniform, Elena regal in her gown, both of them standing tall against the backdrop of ancient paintings and modern justice. The royal sword caught the light again as they passed, its blade a reminder that true authority comes from how you use power, not how you gain it. The royal decree lay on the king's desk, its official seal still warm from the press. The document formally absolved Jack of any wrongdoing in the orphanage fire, while simultaneously stripping Gustav and his conspirators of their positions and privileges. More importantly, it established new protections for Caesaria's medical technologies, ensuring they would remain accessible to those who needed them most. Well, King Marcus said, settling back in his chair, that was quite an evening. The private royal study felt warm and intimate after the drama of the state dinner. Jack sat beside Elena on an antique sofa, while Lady Victoria orchestrated cleanup. Operations through her tablet. Thomas perched on the edge of the desk, still buzzing with excitement. The media's going crazy, he reported, scrolling through his phone. Gustav's attempt to discredit Jack completely backfired. The public loves the story. The firefighter who saved both the princess and the kingdom's humanitarian medical program. The noble families are falling in line too, Lady Victoria added. Amazing how quickly allegiances shift when corruption is exposed. Elena touched the decree gently. This changes everything, doesn't it? It already had, the Queen said, entering with a grace that belied the late hour. The moment Jack ran into that fire, she gave him an appraising look. Though I doubt even you expected to be fighting political fires as well. I just followed my training, Jack said. Assess the situation, identify the threat, protect what matters most. And that's precisely why this worked. King Marcus gestured to the decree. Gustav and his supporters thought in terms of power and manipulation. They never understood that true leadership is about service. Speaking of service, Lady Victoria consulted her tablet, the Children's Hospital Board has requested an emergency meeting. They want to discuss expanding the program now that the threat to the patents is resolved. Elena straightened. Schedule it for tomorrow and add Jack to the committee. Me? Jack looked surprised. Your ideas about emergency response protocols. Impressed them, Elena reminded him. And after tonight, your credibility is rather high. The king cleared his throat. Which brings us to the next matter. He drew out another document from his desk. The marriage laws. The room grew quiet. Jack felt Elena tense beside him. The current laws, King Marcus continued, specify that the heir to the throne must marry someone of noble birth. However, He smiled slightly. They say nothing about what constitutes nobility. Father, Elena leaned forward. We've reviewed the ancient texts. It seems our ancestors were quite clear. True nobility is demonstrated through actions, not just birth. He held up the decree. By saving the princess, protecting our kingdom's humanitarian mission, and exposing a plot against the crown, Jack Morrison has demonstrated nobility of the highest order. Are you saying, Jack started. I'm saying, the king's eyes twinkled, that according to the oldest laws of Caesarea, running into a burning building to save another qualifies as an act of ennoblement, particularly when that act leads to protecting the entire kingdom. Elena's hand found Jack's, squeezing tight. There will be details to work out, Lady Victoria added. Training to complete, protocols to observe. But the legal framework is sound. And the conservative nobles? Jack asked. We'll find it difficult to object, the Queen said dryly, considering many of them owe you for saving their family histories. In the archive, besides, after Gustav's plot was exposed, traditional credentials have lost some of their luster, Thomas whooped. Does this mean you're officially staying? Can you teach me about firefighting? I've always wanted to— Thomas, the Queen warned. But she was smiling. Jack looked at Elena, saw the question in her eyes, the same question she'd asked weeks ago when she first proposed this unlikely future. But now it wasn't just about them. It was about everything they could do together, all the ways they could serve and protect this remarkable kingdom. If you'll have me, he said softly. Elena's smile was brighter than any fire he'd ever faced. Well then, King Marcus stood, suddenly looking very much the father rather than the monarch. I believe we have a proper engagement to announce, one based on love, courage and service rather than political maneuvering. And perhaps, the Queen added, a new tradition to establish, one that reminds us what true nobility means. Jack thought of his father, of all their conversations about duty and purpose. He thought of his firefighting crew back in Seattle, of Mike's proud smile when he understood why Jack had to stay. Most of all, he thought of that night in the orphanage, when one simple act of duty had opened the door to something extraordinary. The decree gleamed in the lamplight, its seal marking the beginning of a new chapter in Caesarea's history, and his own. The modified royal crest hung above the palace gates, its new design capturing the essence of change in Caesarea. The traditional mountain peaks and medical staff remained, but now a firefighter's helmet had been incorporated into the shield, a symbol of service and protection joining ancient heraldry. 2 months after Gustav's plot was exposed, the palace buzzed with wedding preparations. But Jack's mornings still began with a familiar routine. He stood in the palace's new emergency response center, reviewing protocols with a team that combined royal guards and firefighters. The integration's working better than expected, Elena said, joining him at the command station. She wore a simple suit, her hair pulled back practically, her preferred style for their morning hospital committee meetings. The guards are actually enjoying the rescue training. They understand it's all about protection, Jack replied. Different techniques, same goal. The center had been his first major project, modernizing the palace's safety systems while respecting its historical architecture. It represented everything they were trying to achieve, blending tradition with innovation, service with ceremony. Mike had flown in from Seattle to help establish the program, bringing with him Jack's old crew for both the training and the upcoming wedding. They'd taken to palace life with surprising ease, especially after Thomas had convinced them to teach him basic firefighting skills. Your father would have loved this, Mike had said, watching royal guards and firefighters run drills together. He always said the best traditions were the ones that helped people. The wedding itself would reflect that philosophy. They'd maintained the ceremonial elements that gave comfort and continuity to the people, while introducing changes that emphasized service and inclusion. Jack's crew would stand alongside noble families, their dress uniforms mixing with formal court attire, Ready for tomorrow's rehearsal? Elena asked, pulling Jack back to the present. He smiled, thinking of how far they'd come from that smoke-filled night in Seattle. Ready for everything. Above them, the new royal crest caught the morning light, casting a shadow that merged old and new into something stronger than either could be alone. The wedding vows, written on ceremonial parchment in both English and Caesarian, represented months of careful thought. Traditional phrases stood alongside new promises, each word chosen to honor both heritage and hope. I, Jack Morrison, take you not just as my wife, but as my partner in service to Caesarea. I pledge to protect not only you, but all those under our care, to face whatever challenges come with the same courage that brought us together. The great cathedral echoed with history, its ancient stones witness to centuries of royal ceremonies, but today felt different. The usual formal court attire mixed with dress uniforms as firefighters from Seattle stood proudly alongside noble families. Mike, serving as best man, held himself with dignity that matched any aristocrat's bearing. Elena's voice carried clear and strong through the vast space. I, Elena Marielle Sophia de Caesarea, take you as my husband and fellow guardian of our people. I pledge to stand with you in all duties, to face all fires, literal and metaphorical, to build a future that honors both where we came from and who we choose to be. Thomas, acting as ring-bearer, couldn't quite hide his grin as he presented the cushion holding both the traditional royal band and a simple gold ring crafted from Jack's old badge. Lady Victoria, who had fought back tears throughout the ceremony, despite her usual composure, had helped them craft the ceremony to include both royal protocol and firefighter traditions. The ancient cathedral's bell rang in harmony with the ceremonial fire bell that Seattle's Station 23 had sent as a wedding gift. When the Archbishop pronounced them married, the applause came from nobles and firefighters alike, the sound swelling to fill every corner of the cathedral. In that moment, there was no division between old world and new, between tradition and progress. Ready? Jack whispered as they prepared to walk back down the aisle. Elena's smile was radiant. With you, always. The vows on their ceremonial parchment would be preserved in the palace archives, protected by the same security systems Jack had helped design. A testament to how love could bridge any divide when built on shared values of courage, duty, and service. The new royal family portrait captured everything that had changed in Caesarea over the past 6 months. Jack and Elena stood in the palace's great hall, he in his formal uniform that now comfortably merged royal regalia with emergency service honors, she in an elegant gown that somehow suggested both authority and accessibility. The paintings' background showed both the traditional palace architecture and the modern emergency response center through an open door, a deliberate choice that had made Lady Victoria smile in approval. The children's hospital opening went well, Elena said, joining Jack on their private balcony after a long day of royal duties. Below them, the sunset painted the mountains in familiar shades of gold and purple. The new emergency protocols you designed are already making a difference. Mike called from Seattle, Jack replied, helping her with her coat against the evening chill. Says our training program is spreading to other departments. They're calling it the Caesarian model, combining traditional service with modern innovation. The kingdom had flourished under their shared approach to leadership. Elena's diplomatic skills and Jack's practical experience had proven a powerful in combination, earning respect from both traditionalists and reformers. Even some of Gustav's former supporters had become allies, won over by actions rather than ancestry. Thomas had thrown himself into emergency response training, showing a natural talent that made both his parents proud and slightly nervous. Lady Victoria had finally relaxed enough to admit that sometimes the best protocols were the ones written in the heart rather than in books. I had a dream last night, Elena said softly, leaning against Jack's shoulder. I was back in that building, But this time I wasn't scared, because I knew that's where our story really began, with one person choosing to help another, no matter the cost. Jack thought of his father's photo, still kept carefully in his office alongside centuries-old royal artifacts. He would have loved this ending. Elena smiled. Not an ending, a beginning. Below them, the lights of Caesarea began to twinkle on, each one representing someone under their protection. Jack wrapped his arm around his wife, feeling the familiar warmth of shared purpose. Some said fairy tales didn't exist in the modern world, but they were wrong. Sometimes they just needed a firefighter to help write them.